listening to Healthy Discussions, the podcast where we explore big issues and our guests' ideas about them. I'm your host, Zack Hassan, a junior doctor from Scotland. If you're interested in thinking critically about the world around us, then this is the podcast for you. On today's podcast, I'm speaking with Professor Andrew Elder. Andrew is President of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh and a consultant geriatrician in Fife. As well as being an accomplished academic, he's also a visiting professor at Stanford and was medical director of the membership examinations of the Royal College. Professor Elder, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Zack.
And obviously, there's too much that you've done in order to summarise. But have I done a fairly good job of summarising your accomplishments throughout your career?
Yeah, thanks, Zack. You have. I'm a doctor, and I think that my first and foremost, I've been a geriatrician, and a clinician, and secondarily, I developed an interest in medical education, particularly examinations. As you've said, I was head of MRCP UK, which, as you can imagine, made me Mr. Popular. And then latterly, through my interest in medical education, I've developed relationships with a number of centres around the world, the whole world, but particularly in the USA and particularly Stanford, which has turned me on to the topic we're going to talk about a bit today, I think, which is technology in medicine and particularly artificial intelligence.
Yes, and just before we get into the technology aspect, just for people who are listening to the podcast that might not be medical, what exactly does the Royal College do? What's its work? Why is it interested in something like AI?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question because the role of the colleges isn't that well understood, not just by the general public, but also by colleagues in the medical profession. And that's probably the college's plural fault for not explaining what we do as well. So the Royal Colleges are charities, okay? Our charitable purpose is similar to other colleges in that our charitable purpose is really to, the actual wording is to improve the science of medicine and advance the practice of that science. And that means, in common parlance, I guess, to uphold, maintain, and develop standards of patient care. And our college does that largely through education. So for doctors who are qualified as doctors, but who are working to develop, we write their curricula for postgraduate training. We set the examinations that they have to pass and design the what are called workplace assessments that they have to complete if they're going to develop. And once you become a consultant, you're really responsible for providing what's called continuing medical education. So we're using education of doctors at all stages of their careers as a tool to improve standards of patient care.
I see. So it's all about sort of having those educational standards and maintaining them, so the reason we can be confident that consultants in the UK all sort of meet the same standard is because they have been through this, rigorous examination and continue to make use of the benefits of the education. Is that right?
Yeah, so if you're going to progress to be a consultant in the UK in medicine, you have to, well, there's two routes. You can progress through a structured program in which you are prospectively assessed as you go along, that you'll have educational supervisors throughout, you'll have a well circumscribed program of things that you must do and experiences you must get. And on top of that, you've got what are called high stakes exams that you might pass. And if you do all that, that leads you to a certificate that enables you to become a consultant. The alternative route, which is becoming more popular, is known as the portfolio route, in which people can retrospectively apply for certification, become a consultant. And other words, they demonstrate what they've done over their careers in a portfolio of activity and achievement. Typically, they'll have passed the same exams that I've referred to, but it allows people who've not gone through as I say, a prospective structured training program to get the same outcome to certify
Mhm.
in internal medicine to become a consultant.
I see. So the what we're going to be discussing is the how AI is going to change medicine, but how it's really going to change medicine. And so I think maybe the best place to start that conversation is, is there a gap between the hype about AI as we see in the media, uh, and what is actually happening on hospital wards within the NHS, and further afield? What are your insights on that sort of question of where we're at as a snapshot in time?
Yeah, so to answer your question directly, is there a gap? Yes, there undoubtedly is. Okay. You'll be, and some of your listeners will be familiar with what's called the Gartner hype cycle. I'm not going to try and describe how that graph looks, but I'm sure people will Google it and see it themselves. But almost all new technologies go through different phases when they're launched. There's a peak of interest and then expectation, and then it falls away, and we get to a kind of a plateau or a level at which it becomes apparent what the technology can actually do. So at the moment, there is more hype about AI than it will, in my opinion, than it will ultimately deliver in, particularly in ward-based or clinic-based clinical medicine. And hype in itself is an interesting thing. I think that it comes in part from the fact that there's big commercial interests in artificial intelligence and many other technologies that are applied to medicine. So people are, particularly some of my best friends are Californian, I would put it, but particularly in that medical environment in and around Stanford, which is, Stanford's in Silicon Valley with all the big tech companies. And there's lots of venture capital. There are products to be pushed, not just AI related, but there are many medical problems that are really, really pushed and are hyped up as being the next best thing,
Mhm.
and they may not be. The other thing, Zach, I would say, because I am, I would want people to know that I'm not a luddite in this. I'm not anti-technology. I'm pro-human. That's my stance, and the stance of people that I work with in the various groups in America that I'm associated with. But I think that hype leads in some situations, maybe with AI at the moment, to the idea of panacea. That we've got a cure all here. This thing is going to cure everything. It's going to sort out everything for us that needs sorted out in medicine. And that quite clearly will not be the case.
Mhm.
On the other hand, and I use the example of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to say this. Shelley wrote the book Frankenstein because at the time there were concerns about the new technology that was electricity, and she expressed the fear of reanimation of a human being, a monster being created by the technology.
Which seems completely ridiculous today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So I'm saying that because AI will neither be a panacea, but nor will it be a monster. Yeah, it's going to deliver good things for us,
Mhm.
uh, but we just don't know what the good things will be
Mhm.
as yet.
And you've touched on a few things about the snapshot today as kind of I see it, which is that there's a lot of innovation happening. It's happening mainly in private companies, it's happening mainly in the tech sector. And there seems to be a divide between all of that interesting work going on and the reality of the hospital ward. So, for example, where I work in NHS Borders, we're still using paper notes. We're still not actually typing medical information into a database where it can be used. And there also seems to be a divide across the whole NHS. So London hospitals, I'm reading, are starting to implement some AI programs to try to get waiting times down, to try to use, to try and correctly diagnose scans. We've got that technology divide between the London hospitals and the rest of the UK. Is that, how have we got to that point, and is that something we should be worried about, or not?
Well, I think across a health service that is labelled as national. Now, clearly, there's differences between the devolved nations, but ideally, if we want to avoid health inequalities, everything would be equally available across all parts of a national health service. So, innovation is good, and if some hospitals are getting resourced or using the resources available to them to develop new technologies like AI, or actually try and work out what they can deliver in real life NHS practice, that's a good thing. I wouldn't necessarily feel, though, that that leaves other centres at the moment behind. Right? Time will tell if centres that are using AI for the reasons you described prove to improve patient outcomes in some ways, then I suspect central NHS funding will improve in that. But the other thing you've touched on there, Zach, and that is very, very important, is the basic uh, technology available to clinicians, and let's focus on hospital practice, not in primary care, in the wards and outpatient clinics around the NHS at the moment. And I think if we did a survey asking doctors what tech developments would they like to see, most of them would vote for, PCs that are regularly updated, that work, that don't have such complex login, password systems that I forget them all the time. No, they would want basic working technology before they would say, hey, I want an AI program that's going to manage my waiting list for me. So there is an issue there for us in the National Health Service, I think, about the pace that we invest in AI in comparison to the pace that we invest in just getting basic tech working for us.
That chimes absolutely with my experience of technology within the NHS. Like, I'd much rather, when I started in 2018, and this is like, 21st century, like well into the 21st century in 2018. And I remember as an FY1 doctor waiting for the computers to boot up for 10 minutes before we could start using them on the board round. So we would come in a little bit early to get the computers started up, and just could not believe, because up until that point, I thought it was at the cutting edge of medical knowledge and being taught in some of the top universities. But you touched on a really interesting point, um, as well, that actually it might make sense for the NHS to kind of wait a little bit before it jumps on the AI bandwagon and see what happens, see what's happening in different areas and what works, and then start investing. So, as somebody who's close to the data on some of this, uh, you know, are you getting a sense of what AI is good at and what it's not so good at compared to a doctor? In terms of diagnostic accuracy, or in terms of the different aspects of being a doctor, can AI compete with humans at the moment?
I mean, that's a very broad question, and I wouldn't profess to have expertise across, the whole range of potential capabilities
Mhm.
of AI. If I can sort of divide it up a wee bit, it, it, we need better ways at the moment than we've got of managing knowledge. And by knowledge in that, I mean what's called explicit knowledge, facts, figures, and formulae. medical knowledge of that sort in terms of published information is growing exponentially. And AI is very good at what I call collating and curating
Mm-hmm.
information in that way. And lots of people are, if you want to know something, you go quite rightly onto your mobile phone, you'll look it up,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll have information that is put together in a summarized, coherent, accessible way that is usually up to date. It's not. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. We can if you want. It's not without fault that, or without worry or problem, that knowledge. And bottom line is it might not always be correct, but AI is very good at doing that, and we're already in effect using that when we access some online knowledge repositories, like and people are using things like ChatGPT 4 more and more.
Yeah.
But beyond that, once you've got a big pod of data in your database, and we'll maybe come back to what you touched on there, Zach, about the EMR. Um, is that AI systems are good at summarizing and analyzing
Mm-hmm.
large knowledge bases, and in doing that, trying to uh, automate processes more. Like, for example, the management of a waiting list, your example there. Another thing that it can be used for is looking for patterns in an individual that predict risk, and therefore suggesting an early intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Patients can access information of that sort to try and proactively manage their own health. And then the final part, perhaps, is the one you touched on about using, and maybe this is of most interest to actual clinicians on the wards, it's using AI to help us in diagnosis. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that is I'd suggest, much more fraught with problems than we currently appreciate it to be.
So it might be that AI is kind of, from what we've seen of it so far, might be slightly better at working as an assistant or dealing with large quantities of information, but maybe not so much at doing the diagnostic work. And something to come back to the because the way we've set up this podcast is that you gave a talk to some of the core medical trainees about AI, and you were pointing out some of the problems of assuming that AI can do the same job as a doctor. So what kind of are those drawbacks? We've kind of hinted on the idea that its diagnostic accuracy with complex cases might not be as good as a human yet, but what other unintended consequences are we signing up for, if we were to implement AI as it stands more widely?
Yeah, well, what you're making me think there is of the fantastic word techno chauvinism. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it was coined by, I think it was coined by a US journalist. Forgive me, I forget her name, but it's about the idea that technology is implicitly superior to humans. Yeah, that it will be able to do things better than us, and it won't have any problems at all. That's taking an extreme view about it, but there is certainly some feeling in medicine, I feel at the moment, that diagnostic AI will be better than humans are at diagnosis. And I'm not personally convinced that that's the case. And the problems, that arise at the moment are that for diagnostic AI to work well, it needs to refer, so you see a patient, Zach,
Mm-hmm.
with whatever. You put that patient's details into your diagnostic AI assistant, and it uh, looks at its database, whatever that database is, of other patients with a similar presentation, and it tells you what the likeliest diagnosis is. Yeah, I think that's the way people are seeing it. The problem is that the databases or the problems are, the databases that it might refer to are based on two things. One is the electronic medical record. You've pointed out yourself that not everywhere has EMRs yet in the UK. And if you look at studies of the accuracy and completeness of EMRs in the States, they're neither 100% complete nor the information that's been put in isn't always accurate.
Yeah, and that's a real problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
That bad information in is going to be bad information out.
So absolutely. So then, in addition to that, for me, is the whole business of who's going to put, who's making sure the EMR is accurate. Yeah, doctors, I don't think should be data clerks. Yeah, we've got to keep a record about our own patients, but being asked to fill information at the level of completeness that will truly inform a diagnostic AI database, I'm not sure that's a chore for doctors to do. Okay, we already spend arguably too much time looking after the computer rather than the patient, and that pulls us away from it. There is also the issue of whatever if you think then of the other thing that, diagnostic AI would need your patient's information. So I'm saying who's going to enter all that accurately? Information about every other patient with that problem around the world, ideally. And then number three, the other thing it needs is the literature on the topic. Okay, and we know that the literature, for example, I'm a geriatrician. The literature relating to diagnosis of specific problems or treatment of specific problems in older people is biased. It underrepresents older people. So my diagnostic assistant may come up with a diagnosis and treatment plan that is based on biased information and therefore is misleading. The other problem at the moment is one of the features of what's called generative AI, like ChatGPT 4, and it's one of the reasons we like it, is it generates stuff. It makes stuff up. And it's been shown that at the moment that AI has what's called hallucinations, right? And with regard to medicine, what that can mean is that some of the stuff it will come up with, there is no reference that actually backs up what it says. Now that sounds very scary, but at the moment it is the case with generative AI. It may say something that it doesn't have an actual reference or source for, with regard to, for example, treatment. And then I guess the final thing I'd say that people in the States are certainly thinking about, and we've not thought about enough yet, is that if your AI assistant, your augmented intelligence, your AI supporter comes up with a diagnosis and treatment plan, you'll still be liable. Yeah, yeah. The human, will be liable, and for the reasons I've said, AI could get it wrong. So human judgment is still going to have to be applied to whatever AI comes up with.
Yeah, that's something I find really interesting because if the AI makes, a suggestion, do you ignore that? What happens if you wrongly ignore it? Versus what if it's the wrong suggestion?
Yeah,
What happens if you wrongfully follow
yeah.
it? Those are some really complex questions that I feel, the only way these things are going to get worked out is after something goes wrong. And it's almost like we're having to build the plane as it's taking off.
Yeah,
You know,
well, that's a good way of putting it, Zach. I think the bottom line is, if you and there's a few papers on this that if you follow the advice of your diagnostic AI, it could be correct, but the patient could get ill and you would be potentially liable. Or alternatively, you may not follow the advice of AI because you believe it to be incorrect. Things could go wrong and you'd be liable either. So human judgment, right, which is, actually something we should be cultivating and promoting. our powers of judgment will still be needed to be applied.
Yeah.
The AI can help us, but it's not going to take over.
One more thing that I wanted to put to you is so when I was researching for this episode, I'm looking for news articles about AI as it's being implemented in the NHS, and the way that things are normally reported are, so there was this a tool called Mia that helped to diagnose breast cancer from mammograms. And the way this was reported is, that it successfully identified cancer in 11 women who was missed by a doctor. And I'm reading that and I'm thinking, but what about the dangers of overdiagnosis of healthy people? Are we wrongly subjecting people to treatment? So, to give you one more example, there was a study that had electronic sensors in people's kettles and fridges, and the idea is that they were discharging people from the medical ward, and using the sensors to find out that what their eating habits were as a sign of, oh well, maybe there's something wrong because they're not eating properly, they might need readmitted to hospital. And I'm thinking, oh my god, the amount of extra work that's going to be needed to check up on all of these sensors that are alerting people is probably going to outweigh any benefit, or definitely has the potential to outweigh any benefits. So, do you think that side of things, the harms from actually too much AI, is something that we're thinking about?
Yeah, well, these are all great examples, Zach. And a direct answer to your question is no, we're not thinking about them enough. And and that's part of that techno chauvinism idea there, that we kind of A, think that technology will be better, and B, we underestimate the kind of unforeseen problems that it may bring. I mean, something else you've touched on there that I'm interested in, of course, and everybody should be interested with regard to AI, is people's consent to have their data included in the relevant
Mhm.
database, right? And there is some evidence that it's a great thing called the Edelman Trust Barometer. I don't know if you ever look at it, that
Mhm.
suggests that around the world, people are actually just beginning to get a bit more worried about the fact that all their information is in these databases. The machines will play around. The other aspect relating to the sensors that you speak about there, other than the fact that your data, intimate data about your day-to-day life is being shared, is the whole idea of surveillance and autonomy, and taking away people's choices about how they live their own lives. You can imagine the alarm going off in your, I don't know,
Mhm.
your daughter's house when you eat the wrong thing, and you get a phone call to say you're eating the wrong thing. But yeah, and then the other thing you made me think there about the potential for overdiagnosis with AI was that we have at the moment an epidemic of overdiagnosis and overtreatment, in no small part related to conventional imaging. Yeah, where we
Mm.
find the classic example is a very small nodule in a CT chest that's been done in a lung that's been done for another reason. We don't know the natural history of the lesion, but some people are submitted to invasive procedures that may cause harm. Now, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, I'm not a Luddite and I don't want to sound like everything about
Mhm.
AI is bad. Some of the image recognition stuff in radiology is very, very good. And that will be something that will reduce radiologists' reporting time, in my understanding and opinion. And another application in radiology has been, for example, AI mapping out the relevant field for radiotherapy, which is, as I understand it, it's a very kind of burdensome chore for a human radiologist, and it does that much more quickly and saves time to concentrate on other tasks.
Hmm. So, just to kind of summarize where we're at, seems like there's opportunities with AI, and genuinely good opportunities, but there are some risks that we need to think carefully about. And I suppose then the question is, how is this going to change the medical profession as a whole? And I know that you have some views about that because you've said that actually skills with technology are something that doctors are going to have if they want to have a competitive advantage in the workplace. So I wonder how you see the role of doctor, physician changing, and maybe the relationship with the patient as well, as we start to see more of these technologies.
I do believe that um, the doctor who embraces AI will displace ultimately any doctors who just don't want to go with it, don't want to work with it. I think it will become a part of the way that we work. And if that's right, and outcomes will be better from this partnership between human and machine, doctors working with AI, then we have to think what the implications in that are for teaching and training of those
Mhm,
who follow us. And that's a very, very difficult question, Zach.
mm,
Medical curricula are jam packed already. As soon as we start to say, well, we've got to put something else in, the clamour is usually, well, what are we going to take out?
out. Yeah.
Um, I think whatever you want to call it, though, digital literacy, an understanding of what AI can do, and also an understanding of some of the broad issues with it at the moment are vital for medical students at the
Mhm,
moment. They should recognize its potential. They should know some of the problems like confidentiality of patient data and potential for bias, the fact that it may not always be right, the fact that you as a human will still have to make your decisions. Um, so we should be finding ways, I feel, to um, help them understand that.
yeah. I mean, it's certainly something that I feel that, am I adequately prepared as a junior doctor for a world that uses AI? I suppose the answer for that is no. But then none of the world is. We're trying to work this out as it's happening.
One of the dangers is that it becomes, and this is a problem with some other types of technology, it's a black box. Yeah.
Hmm.
And you don't understand what's within it. And it becomes, therefore, something that you don't question its outputs as much because you don't understand how it works. And
Hmm.
you accept what it's doing and what it's saying. There's great dangers in medicine if that happens with AI. So my I'm right at the end of my career. My advice to those earlier in their career would be play around with AI, read a bit about it, try and understand what it's doing, what its limitations are, uh, and apply your common sense thereafter. You'll see lots of benefits and lots of potential problems.
Yeah, and just to sort of slightly change the topic to kind of, well, how should we be uh, regulating this, or what is there a role for government in the development of these technologies? What are we maybe not doing as a country that we should be having a conversation about in relation to how this is being rolled out? I'm thinking of, for example, the Babylon scandal, where there was an AI well, it wasn't actually an AI company. They said that they had AI. Uh, Government didn't really check, and Babylon picked up a number of NHS contracts, and whistleblowers that tried to say, "Hey, this system isn't doing what it's supposed to do," were sort of sidelined for a while until it all came out. And I can just see that happening across the NHS in sort of lots of different ways potentially. So as kind of somebody who's having conversations with people at the head of the medical profession, what should we be asking for from government that will help this grow in a way that's good for patients?
Well, I think that, as we've touched on already, the NHS, in my opinion, needs to work out what its technological, or IT, put it that way, priorities actually are. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I firmly believe that the priority is getting working tech, basic computer hardware in every ward and clinic with software in it that enables you to join up with primary care, to
Mhm.
join up with social care, to have a reliable online prescribing system, to have a reliable online radiology viewing and reporting system. And that isn't ubiquitous at the moment across the NHS. That's where our priority should be. New technology, which, as I've said already, may promise much but is pushed a lot by commercial companies, should be piloted at small scale. And if it proves to be more efficient than current ways of doing things, um, doesn't have unforeseen problems, doesn't have unforeseen costs, then by all means start to roll it out.
Mhm.
The priority of the NHS is to deliver good, safe, high quality patient care. The priority of the doctor is to do that as well, but secondarily to teach those who follow. We all, I think, naturally want to be innovators, but the NHS and maybe some individual doctors need to be careful that our desire to innovate doesn't disrupt priorities. And
Yeah.
as I say, make us invest too much in high promise new techs like diagnostic AI, I would say, before we know a bit more about them.
Yeah. And I wonder if you hit on a really good point about the dangers of overinvestment. And I wonder, what are the things about how medicine is practiced that we should be really trying hard to hold on to? I'm thinking of things like empathy, that sort of judgment that you talked about, the potential to recognize when, new discoveries that an AI system that is designed to think along certain tracks might not see. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, the groups I work in, particularly actually at Stanford, and particularly also in the Society of Bedside Medicine, that's what their focus is on the human contribution to healthcare. It seems extraordinary that we have to talk about that. We talk so much about what tech can do, but we do need to think more about what humans bring to healthcare. And that's why I said at the beginning, we're not anti-technology, we're pro-human. So I think that um, humans bring, obviously a number of things. I mentioned the idea of explicit knowledge, facts, figures, and formulae at the beginning there. The computers are very good at codifying and manipulating and managing. But there's also what's called tacit knowledge, so that's wisdom, experience, intuition, creativity, a whole stack of other things, some of which AI is nowhere near emulating at the moment, and other parts of which it is. Like I've said already, generative AI is creative, and that's one of the things we like it. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's more to knowledge than facts, figures, and formulae. We also have phenomenal powers of observation. Yeah. The well trained eye can pick up a whole, stack of stuff. Our eyes and our brains have evolved over, tens, hundreds of thousands of years to enable us to do that. And although AI is good at some aspects of image recognition, it's not as good as us, many. And that's why we've got, I don't know if you probably do on your own computer come across times when you've got to log in with the captcha type system. Tell me every box in which there's a bicycle, for example. Now, hey, if AI bots are that good, how can they do that? I didn't realize until recently that CAPTCHA stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to tell computers and humans apart. Yeah. But there's just a basic example of a human quality, and that's the power of observation, and that machines don't emulate yet. The other one I think you referred to is empathy, and we are well, most humans who go into the medical profession regard empathy as important. And
That's a good sign that the training has helped.
yeah, well, but and I was talking earlier there about spending time looking after a computer rather than looking after a patient. I think most clinicians I know recognise that the way that they speak, act, and listen with patients is of huge value in the therapeutic relationship. And um, I'm not. I can say a wee bit about where machines are with that, but I'm not sure even if they could emulate us, that we should be asking them to emulate us. I think the real place for technology like that in healthcare is to free up time for us to do the human bit with the human doctoring bit with the human patient.
Just to push on that slightly, because you do encounter the view that AI, it's just a matter of time before AI is going to get better at all of this soft stuff as well as all of the hard stuff. And I'm interested in the reasons why you're not in that camp of people, um, and especially because, well, I'm a bit more skeptical and sort of think, well, it'd be nice if AI kind of saves us all of this time to, do this stuff. But is that actually what's going to happen, or is it going to become just one more task that we've got to deal with?
Sorry, what becomes one more task?
So, dealing with the AI system, actually, we say it's going to save us time, but actually, is it just going to create a whole bunch more tasks for us to do? So, is it actually going to make us more productive, or are we just going to spend even more time engaging with the AI system rather than with the patient?
Yeah, well, I don't know. You make me think several things. It's not solely about AI. There's a very good book called I think it's called Why Robots Won't Save Japan. It's about the use of care technology for older people. And one of the points made there is that the human labor involved in caring for older people when care technology is ramped up doesn't decline. It just changes. The care staff spend more time ensuring that the care bot is working, yeah, than they do with the person. So the overall labour costs don't go down, or time isn't freed for the carer to spend time with the human being, the patient, the person. And that the same may apply, like you're suggesting there, with AI. It may give us other stuff to do. But the other thing I would say, Zach, and I think I kind of use this slide in the talk you heard me give, is that we all have to acknowledge that this is early days technology. An analogy I gave was of, we're Model T Ford at the moment. And if somebody had said, what's the potential of the Model T Ford for a mass transport system, they would have said, oh, I'm not sure about that. But now we're at Tesla, 100 years later. So this technology could really, really develop in ways that we can't predict. However, coming back to your example of empathy, there, do we really want a situation in which that part of an encounter, the listening, explaining, supporting, feeling part, is handed over to a machine? Even if a machine can do it, do we really want that? Should we do that? We could do it, but should we do it? And if we do, with all this time that we've now saved, what is it that we're going to be doing as doctors? Yeah, I would rather than try and make individual doctors more efficient, if that's the right word, through the use of technology, I would train more doctors.
Yeah.
Or more healthcare professionals. Yeah, more humans to look after other humans.
Mhm.
Healthcare is a people project. We need more people, not more machines.
And as the UK is one of the countries with the least amount of healthcare workers per population, I would wholeheartedly get behind that. Um, but I suppose I've got a question about who is going to drive this forward, because notably there's a general election that we all know is coming this year. Noticeably, these are not the questions that we're talking about with the debate around the NHS, even though they're really fundamental questions that are being asked now and are going to shape how medicine develops. Do we want machines to be doing some of this work? So, who is who is actually going to have a say in how that question gets answered? Is it going to be more private companies? Is it going to be doctors? Is it going to be politicians? And yeah, how do you see that panning out?
Well, there is little doubt that the commercial interest in this is extreme,
Mhm.
right? So, tech companies, many of whom, but not all, are based in Silicon Valley, will continue to push all sorts of ideas. And that's why, I'm stressing the need for doctors to try and really get their heads around what this technology can and can't do. And every time you hear of a project kicking off, maybe plan to kick off in your own hospital, try and find out about what it's doing, what it might do, because that commercial pressure is going to continue.
That's almost an argument that knowledge is power, and if clinicians want to be able to influence these things, they've got to know about them. And maybe there's a little bit of anxiety from you that we're not doing that at the moment.
Yeah, well, there's so much else going on, Zach. You know what day to day life as a doctor, or for other healthcare professionals, you know what that's like in the NHS at the moment. And it's difficult, I think, for many people to find the headspace to think about these kinds of issues. But this is one that we really need to, because it has, if you, from the point of view of bedside medicine, humans looking after humans, it does have the potential to disrupt the human-human, the doctor-patient relationship in a way that I find it hard to believe that it would be beneficial overall.
Mhm.
And that's the sense I get from most doctors who speak about it. Politicians, you mentioned private companies, doctors, and politicians. Well, they too have their own priorities. They're in the UK. Their own political cycle is shorter, I would suggest, than is ideal for the development of health services. They're often looking for quick wins. They're often looking to encourage innovation and business. And they're often looking to say, well, our NHS is an innovator as well. And that's one of the reasons we've been attracted to big high tech solutions in inverted commas, that haven't always worked. Doctors are a trusted voice still by the public and certainly by politicians. So we've got the opportunity to lobby them, and I would be lobbying them, and I do lobby them, for balance here. Okay, let's try and innovate where we can, but let's not get carried away with the potential for of what new technology can bring. And if I may say one other thing there, I
Mhm.
think one of the reasons that we have such a difficult workforce challenge at the moment, with far fewer doctors than we need, far far fewer than many other countries. One of the reasons behind that is that we've overestimated, yeah, the potential for new technologies to reduce human input. If you think back 10 or 15 years ago, genomics was going to revolutionize medicine and potentially reduce the input that we needed to have, because we'd be able to tailor medicine much more specifically and prevent much more. Now, that hasn't borne fruit. I worry that this, panacea, as it were, of AI is going to do the same. We need to invest in people in the health for healthcare first and foremost, and everything else comes secondary, including tech.
Yeah. I'm hearing the seeds of a sort of wish list of things that government should be prioritizing. I wonder what else is on that list. I'm wondering whether there's, because I haven't heard this from anything that I've found about whether there's a way to make all of these incentives align in a helpful direction. Is there a way private companies can work with doctors? Because I think that the NHS has massive advantages in terms of the data that it has access to. And if the UK was able to work that out, well, actually, maybe we could be sort of leading the way with some of these developments rather than worrying about what's going to happen when they hit.
Yeah, well, and I think we've spoken about that. It's about priorities in IT spend, and is particularly diagnostic AI across the board would not justify, in my opinion, major investment as a priority at the moment. It should be small scale pilot projects, tests of proof. See if something does deliver in the NHS setting. See if it can be used by staff. See if its outputs can be understood. See if patients accept it, etc. Before it's rolled out at a big scale.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I just wanted to end on this last question: that if people are wanting to get more involved in this area, if they want to find out more, is there something that they can go and read that will be, a good sort of extension to the conversation that we've had?
Well, wouldn't it be ironic if I said, if you want to know something to read, type it into ChatGPT-4, it'll give you a good list of things. but it will. I'm just trying to remember the acronym. HAI at Stanford, human-centered artificial intelligence. They've been around for a good while. They are. If anything, they err, as it were. Maybe not errs. Maybe err is the wrong word. They lean on the side of exuberance and enthusiasm about AI in healthcare and other domains. And I lean on the other side. I'm more cautious. But that's quite a good start point website, HAI Stanford, to learn more about many of the very amazing and exciting things that are being tried in the American setting to do with artificial intelligence. But also you'll find some cautionary stuff there, particularly about regulation that you mentioned about, Zack, and about the ethics of everything that we're doing here, and indeed the morality of everything that we're doing with this.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's been honestly a fantastic insight into all of the different aspects of this change that is coming. I know your time is very precious, so thanks very much for giving up some of that time for the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thanks for giving your own time, Zack, to create all this. I know that you're a busy clinician too, so good on you for taking the time to put all this episode and other episodes in the series together.
Thanks very much. Okay. If you like the podcast, the best way to support it at this stage is to tell your friends about it and share it on social media. You can use the hashtag Healthy Discussions or my Twitter handle @MontereyZack to tell me your thoughts about this episode. In the description, you'll find more about our guests' work and their book recommendations. Thanks to Health Education England North East, Health Education England South West, and Medics Academy for supporting this episode. All of us at the Healthcare Leadership Academy are grateful for their support.